All right, let's cut across to the latest news break that is coming in. America has come and clarified. U.S. Secretary of War made it very clear we will end this war on our terms. This is not Iraq. This is not an endless war. Operation is destroy Iranian nuclear weapons. He further went on to state that former regime had chance to make a deal, but Tehran was stalling it. Listen in to the latest that's coming in.
To the media outlets and political left screaming endless wars, stop. This is not Iraq. This is not endless. I was there for both. Our generation knows better, and so does this president. He called the last 20 years of nation-building wars dumb, and he's right. This is the opposite. This operation is a clear, devastating, decisive mission. Destroy the missile threat, destroy the Navy, no nukes. Israel has clear missions as well, for which we are grateful. Capable partners, as we've said since the beginning, capable partners are good partners.
All right, you just heard the U.S. Secretary of War, Pete Hegseth, make it very clear this is not an endless war. As per the Secretary of War, he made it clear that this wasn't started by the United States. The regime had a chance to make a deal, but Tehran was stalling it, so practically forcing the hand of America with Israel in a joint operation. The operation is eventually to destroy Iranian nuclear weapons. All right, so that's the latest coming in. I want to quickly bring in our senior journalist, someone who's been tracking the crisis very closely in West Asia, Sandeep Unithan, who's in the studio with me. Sandeep, you have now America coming in, and I would think the big ticket announcement is where he also said that this is not an endless war, this is not Iraq, and practically, as per America, their hand was forced.
Absolutely, Preeti. And it's very interesting. He would make the comparison with the 2003 US invasion of Iraq. That was a long, costly deployment of the United States. 20 years is what they spent, several $1 trillion. Thousands of US soldiers died in that operation. Here, it was meant to be a regime change operation. Now, the big question is that could they change the regime through just airstrikes? And, in that statement, Pete Hegseth seems to indicate that they've already achieved some of their objectives by saying that the former regime, for instance, he says that he uses that word to imply that they've already achieved some of their objectives by, changing the regime, going into this war. He says that we didn't start this war, but we are finishing it. And this is not a so-called regime change war, but the regime sure did change. Those are his words there. So it's very interesting that the US already seems to be looking for an off-ramp to say, look, we've already done what we had to do. We've destroyed their nuclear facilities. We've changed the regime in a sense. So, Do you see a bit of backpedaling there? Because, Sandeep, because yes, that's what it seems to suggest. Because, when the military action started in the form of airstrikes, it was made very clear that this was to change and flip the regime in Iran. Absolutely. And now they seem to indicate, from Pete Hegseth's statement, it seemed to indicate that they've already achieved that regime change that they wanted to, which is to assassinate Ayatollah Khamenei. And that's it's interesting that a lot of what happened in the last 3 days, Preeti, is something that they didn't plan for. The fact that they never assumed that Iran would retaliate the way it did after Ayatollah Ali Khamenei's assassination, that they would expand the theater of conflict into so many other Gulf nations to attack commercial interests over there. So this is clearly the US attempting some amount of damage control, looking for an off-ramp to try and
So number one, Sandeep, if you have to
accomplished.
break it down, because this is also, with what President Trump has been saying in the last 48 hours, there's been mixed messaging.
Yes.
But this is very clear, because there seems to be a fair amount of backpedaling in the, saying it's a limited war. We are not looking at in Iraq because there is criticism back home as well.
Right.
This will have economic implications already, that can be seen in markets across the world, and with oil, will have a bearing. Number three, where he says, and I want to reflect back onto the statement that where he says that the regime has been changed in itself, by taking
Yes.
out the top supreme leader, America and Israel seem to read it as their objective achieved.
Right, absolutely, and they're just looking for a chance here to put in a mission accomplished signboard somewhere, hang that somewhere, just as George
So are
Bush
we
did
now looking
after,
at, are we now looking at days?
we're looking at possibly even hours, I would think, that the US certainly didn't bargain for this level of Iranian retaliation. So they would possibly at some point, this is purely looking at Pete Hegseth's statement, that they're looking for an off-ramp here. They are saying that, look, we achieved a lot of what we planned to do, which is to change the regime, to...
Is it charting out an exit course?
It is looking for an exit course very clearly. And that's, based on what Pete Hegseth has just said. One has to wait and see what President Donald Trump now weighs in. How is he going to react to what's been going on in the in West Asia over the last couple of hours?
Sandeep, before we cut across to the next bit of breaking news, I want you to maybe, how much of impact on what we just heard by America could be generated from as a pressure point of other Gulf countries that continue to be under sustained attack by Israel, by
sure
Iran?
The Gulf countries, they must be furious, Preeti, at this moment. We've seen a little, sense of that coming out on social media platforms. But the fact is that a lot of the Gulf nations over there, the Arab monarchies, are deeply vulnerable. They've been caught in the line of fire. This is not a war that they started out to, push the United States into, right? This is a war that they were dragged into. They have no choice.
And the very reason that America had bases in these countries,
Yes.
the official explanation was to protect these nations.
Absolutely.
And it's counterproductive right
Today,
now.
those bases, these Gulf nations are under attack because of those very same bases. Now they're asking the United States, look, you were meant to protect us. Where is your umbrella? You have cruise missiles, drones, easily penetrating all of these so-called missile defenses. And we are vulnerable.
So at this juncture, Sandeep, when we shift into our next, news break that is coming in, one can read this backpedaling and possibly that America bit off more than it could chew.
Yes, and looking for an opportunity to say
To exit.
mission accomplished.
Mission
Yes.
accomplished and coming out
And yes.
speaking of it as a win. And we
Yes.
could also already hear it in the statement there, which was delivered. But of course, viewers, all of this will need to be taken in when President Trump speaks. And a lot will also depend on that. Is he going to take a contrarian line, or this is a well thought out strategy by America? We'll know in a couple of hours.